These blue Bibles, open it up to page 1. I have big goals for next week, and that is namely for us to get to page 2 in the Bible. So we've been here for a little minute, and I think we're going to finish up the first page today and then go on to the second one. So we have a working deal in our family that has worked really well for us in 19 years of marriage. It might be helpful for you to impart as well, and it's a one-to-one trade, and it works like this. I love movies, and my wife loves movies, and so we have a standing agreement that in exchange for one kung fu movie, one particular war movie, or some sort of action movie, I have to sit. No, I get to sit. It's great joy for me to sit through some variety of romantic comedy. You guys are familiar with the concept of a romantic comedy, right? Yes, we love them. Oh, amen, brother. All right, here we go. So you guys are feeling me. So 19 years ago, I sat down and watched a movie. Okay, so here's the thing. I was really hoping that there'd be an illustration from some action movie I could pull out. That's not it, all right? So there's a movie I watched 19 years ago called The Princess Diaries. All right, see, some of you are familiar with this movie, all right? It's got Anne Hathaway in it. It's a good movie, right? Okay, all right, so let's keep going. All right, so here's the thing. In The Princess Diaries, you guys know the story. Anne Hathaway is this young lady who just kind of lives a common life until all of a sudden she is presented with the reality that she is heir to the throne of a place called Genovia. It drives me nuts that I remembered the name of the country, but I truly did. All right, so she is going to be heir to the throne of this thing, right? And she has the whole movie is basically revolving around the premise. This lady's, she was a common person who was royalty and didn't know it. And then she's faced with this really big crisis at the end, right? Do I become queen, or do I just keep on going with life as usual? And she chooses queenship, and then there's a sequel that I have not seen. But there's one that comes after it. So the reason that's important is this. I wondered, I can literally remember watching this movie and asking myself, why am I remembering the details of this movie? And I think the reason that I'm remembering the details of this movie is so that I could tell you this story and be completely comfortable with my masculinity and tell you that what's happening in that movie is very much what happens in our lives and how we understand the image of God. Now, let me explain. When God created man, he created man to rule, right? We see that all over Genesis 1. In fact, the new heavens and the new earth, we talked about this last week, what will we be doing? We will be serving Christ for sure. We'll be worshiping at the feet of Jesus, but when the heavens are remade, when the new heavens and the new earth comes, what will we be? We will be ruling. The command that God left for us is to be fruitful and multiply and to have dominion over the world. We're called to rule in so many different ways. And yet we live as though that's not at all what we're supposed to be doing. We do something completely different with our lives. Now, that's because of the fall. The fall has changed a lot, but the thing that hasn't changed is that man is created in God's image. And that is no less radical a thought now than it was thousands of years ago when Moses is speaking this word to the Israelites. Because imagine for a moment, again, we try to do this every week because it's important to understand the book of Genesis is a real book written to real people with real problems, right? The Bible doesn't have any application in your life until you start to realize it was written to people just like us. Clothing was different, culture was different, sin is the same. Need for a redeemer is the same. Those are the things that we share in common with these people, and these people who are sitting in the wilderness, getting ready to go into the promised land, generation after generation after generation before them have been slaves. Place called Egypt. And in Egypt, there was only one human that was created in God's image, and it was the Pharaoh. And so the Pharaoh was the image of God, and then when he died, he was a God. He was a God on earth, and then he changed and became a God. We know that's all baloney, right? But here's the thing. They believed there was a system that the Egyptians believed in, and it was this. Pharaoh was God and the image of God on earth. Egypt, the nation of Egypt, existed to serve the Pharaoh, and Israel existed to serve the Egyptians. And so the Israelites were slaves, generation after generation after generation of devalued, dehumanized slaves. Now, what happens? God frees these people. They go out into the wilderness, and they're nomads, going into a land that's been promised to them. But before they get to that land that's been promised to them, Moses wants them to see this radical thing God's image. He created everyone in God's image. There is nothing more freeing for you this morning than to know that not only have you been created in God's image, the whole purpose of being a Christian is to redeem what God has created. And so it felt like Genesis 1:27 needed its own sermon. So we're going to read one verse and then kind of back and forth a little bit. Genesis chapter 1. Let's start at verse 26. If you have your Bibles open, verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. Let's pray. Father, I pray that we would feel and experience the freedom purchased for us by Christ and his work as we explore this text today. Help us to see the hope that lies within knowing that we have been made in your image. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So, the image of God is likely one of the most important concepts in the entire Bible, one of the keys to understanding kind of the whole of the Christian faith. And it puts meaning and understanding behind an awful lot of things that help us to understand why we believe the things that we believe. And so I want to spend enough time this morning studying the image of God that you can at least get some categories. The reality is this: I'm going to preach for this whole time in one verse, and I'm still not going to say everything that needs to be said in order for us to fully cover it. But I want to at least get us a starting point, because we believe strongly, and we'll talk about this in a second, in issues like the right to life. We believe this, and when we do, most Christians have been educated far enough to be able to say, well, we believe this because we believe that man was created in the image of God. But the problem is if I start to push on that a little bit and say, but what does that mean? And a lot of times what we come up with is a faulty or incomplete definition of what it means to be created in the image of God, and yet one of the first things that sets the Christian worldview apart from every other worldview in the world in many important ways is understanding what it means to be created in the image of God. And so what I want to do is just kind of give us an outline of this. Number one, I want to talk about what it means. Number two, I want to talk about why it matters. And number three, I want to talk about what Jesus has done. Okay? What it means, why it matters, what Jesus has done. First, what does it mean to be created in the image of God? I think you could summarize it this way. To be created in the image of God means that we resemble and reflect the nature of God, and we represent him here on earth. Okay? We resemble and reflect his nature, and we represent him on earth. Being made in the image of God. So when the Bible says God created man in his own image, that is an okay way of saying it. A better way of saying it, if you really want to honor what the text is saying, is we were created as his image. That kind of deepens it, right? We were created to represent who he was. You start to see that this builds categories into what exactly happened at the fall, right? And we were created to represent God in a very complete sort of way on earth. And then the fall happened. We'll talk about that in a second. But ultimately, we are called to resemble the God that made us. And it is knit into the fundamental essence of being human, to be created as his image. So it's not something that we do, it's something that we are. And by virtue of being that thing, we do certain things. Does that make sense? So by virtue of being created in the image of God, we then act certain ways. We do certain things. We have certain capacities. The reason that's important will show up in just a minute, but it's important to realize that it's something that we are, not something that we do. And it means, number one, that we look like our dad. You think about this in terms of earthly children. My son has eyebrow expressions that very quickly will show you that he is my son, because we share that, right? So you can see it in him and say, boy, you look like your dad, right? Kids resemble their dads. There's a deeper meaning than that, but it's a good starting point for us. We should look like the God who made us, but it also means that we should act like the God who made us. Now, we just did a whole sermon series prior to this one called God Is. And in that series, here's what we did. We talked about a whole list of ways that God is nothing like us, right? God is holy. God is sovereign. We're getting ready when we take another break after Christmas. We're going to do another series, and we're going to talk about all the ways in which God is like us, because there are things that God is that we ought to be like. For instance, merciful. We're called to be merciful. Why? Because the God who made us and redeemed us is merciful. We are called to execute justice. We're called to be just because the God who made us is a God of perfect justice. We're called to love because, as John tells us later in the New Testament, God is love. We're called to be in relationship. Not necessarily just husband-wife relationship, but in relationship with one another. Because our God is a God who exists in perfect relationship with himself as the Trinity. And so those things are ways in which we're supposed to look like and act like God. But something went wrong, right? I would say, hang on, we're going to get into Genesis 3. That's going to take us a minute to unpack. We're not going to do that this Sunday. We're going to do it in a few Sundays. And we're going to talk about what went wrong. But we know the fall happened. But the fall didn't take away the image of God. It marred it. It defamed it. The best way that I could get it to make sense in my mind, and I think it's still an incomplete illustration, there's so much about this that's a mystery to us, right? But if you've ever been to Bald Rock, I can remember what Bald Rock looked like 20 years ago when I was a college student. And there was still some graffiti up there, and it was not, but you could see that somewhere in there was this pristine beauty that somebody came along and said, you know what I want to do? I'm going to totally ruin this place by drawing all over it, right? And so you had this beautiful place that has graffiti all over it, and if you're not careful, you can miss the beauty for seeing all of the distortion. But think of the fall that way. It distorted the image of God. It marred the image of God. It's like graffiti on us in so many ways. It distorted what God has created as perfect. We distorted. And so there's this thing that happened where we go from being the once glorious kings and queens called to rule over creation, right? He calls us, be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, have dominion, gives us this great mandate, and we go from being stewards of the earth to slaves to wickedness. We go from serving the King of heaven to trying to dethrone the King of heaven. And that's what went wrong, right? But even in that, every human still is created as God's image. The lingering image of God exists in each person. So the image of God means that we resemble and reflect the nature and character of God, and we represent him here on earth. Now, why does that matter? Man, there are a bunch of reasons why this matters. I have narrowed it down to 4. And then a whole bunch of little subpoints, because you guys know that's kind of what I do. 4 reasons that it matters that we are created in the image of God and that we are created as the image of God. Number 1, human life is valuable. Human life is valuable. Every human is an image bearer, and we're called then to see human life as valuable. In fact, this is not the only place we see this. We're going to get to Genesis 9, and God's going to be speaking to Noah, and he's going to tell Noah, Noah, if someone kills a person, then that person's life should be taken because every person's created in the image of God. So we see it over and over again in the Scriptures, this idea of the inherent value of human life. How much is a human life worth? And the answer is far more than you could calculate. Every life is valuable. We hear it in Genesis 9. We hear it in the declaration of Jeremiah as he receives the calling, as God says that before you were in the womb, I knew you. We hear this in the psalm we read earlier that says, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. What is man that you are mindful of him? Every life has value, and this was so different. You remember what happened to Israel when they started to outnumber the Egyptians, right? What happened to all the children? What did they do? They killed them. Why? Because Israel life didn't have value to the Egyptian culture. So now here's God who's redeemed Israel and said, no, all life has value. So hopefully you can feel the weight of the application of this text as we think about where we are in a culture that has completely devalued human life. And so we want to start first by saying that human life has value, but more than that, all ages are equal image bearers. All ages. Every age of humanity bears the image of God. From the moment of conception to the last breath a person takes, every age has value. This means that we are called to be a pro-life people, not because it is a political issue, but because it is a theological issue. It is a Bible issue. We are called to champion the cause of life. It means that every Christian can and ought to be doing something to champion that cause. It should be more than just Facebook protests. There should be action. We as Christians have to get to the point where we replace activism with actual action and activity. The people should know that we believe in this because we live as though it matters and we live as though we believe in it. We should be people who don't just passively complain about the issues of life. We should be people who are actively involved. So the question is, Christian, what are we doing to demonstrate our convictions to the world? There are a lot of ways to do this. And I'm happy to help go through what some of those ways might be. That life matters, and we're called to act like it does. But that does not just apply to the infant. For certain, we are talking about abortion. We also are talking about the oldest among us. We need to be careful to spend equal time on those things. We don't just reject abortion. We reject physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia, and we elevate the intrinsic value of the elderly because of this issue. We value all life. The bottom line is this, friends. If we are truly a pro-life people because we believe that every human life is created in the image of God, then we ought to be the first people running into nursing homes and orphanages. Both. It's not an either or. All life has value. We ought to be the people champion the cause of prison ministry. We ought to be the people championing the cause of the people who have been rejected and downtrodden by society. It broke my heart this morning. I read a Facebook lament over a person who was homeless and how over and over and over and over and over again, the comments were about how this person has no value. And all of these people, so many of these people will then go to church and read things like this and fail to apply it, friends. All life matters. That means that yours does too. So does mine. We don't ascribe it value because of the position that a person has been given. We ascribe it value because that person has been created to reflect God. It means that we ought to be doing this. It means if we're truly pro-life people, when a young lady makes a life-changing mistake, she ought to know that she could come to the church first and be loved and cared for. Shame on us for proclaiming with our mouth that we believe a thing and then failing to live it out based on the way we love the people around us. Shameful. We should repent of that. The moment that the people that we have influence with begin to trust the people outside the church more than they feel like they can trust the people inside the church, we have failed. We are called to love people. Because people are created in God's image. Every life is precious. But it doesn't just mean that all ages are image bearers. It also means that all races are image bearers. That's something, again, I want to hammer things that we failed at. Let's start with this one, right? If this is truly the case, the very essence of the sin of racism is based in the rejection of the fact that a person who looks different than me bears the image of God with the same weight as I do. And we should not sugarcoat that. It is sin, and it is wrong. We are equal image bearers. All humans, regardless of cultural background, are created as God's image bearers. To reject this as true is to simply fail to live in a way that is consistent with the Bible. There is no room in the Bible From the very first chapter of Genesis to the last chapter of Revelation, to the picture in Revelation where every tribe and tongue and nation is around the throne of God. There is no room in the Scriptures for racism. Why? Because we are image bearers. Every person is created in God. But it's not just every age, and it's not just every race. It's every person, and that means that men and women are equal image bearers. I want to be careful to explain here exactly what I mean. But here's the thing. When you read verse 27, again, put yourself in the context of being an Israelite. You've been a slave. You're in a culture that's completely dominated by men, and so women are treated as just slightly higher than property. And now you're a lady. I think the ladies hear this and can at least inherently understand the value of this text in a way that sometimes men can't if we don't force ourselves to. And listen when he says, in the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. We're called both equally to bear the image of God. Now, a couple of things I would say. First is this. Roles do not assign value. I am not saying that men and women have the same roles. Men and women have different roles both at home and in the church. Right? But that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's the way it's supposed to be. I'm not saying that men and women are exactly alike. If you live under the impression that men and women are exactly the same, I would encourage you to get married or have a child that is the opposite gender, and you will learn this relatively quickly. Right? So I'm not saying those things. And so it's important first to start off by saying that roles don't define value. See, men are called the head of the household, not called to be the head of the household. They are called the head of the household, meaning men, if you're a married man, you are the head of your home, and you're either good at it or you're bad at it. It's not a call to act like something. It's called to be something. Right? That's helpful for us. The call to action. Oh, I'm leading whether I want to be or not. I'm either passively leading or I'm actively leading, but I'm leading, and you'll be accountable before God for the way you led your family and your children. It's critical, right? I'm also not, so that's the trick. Women are called to respect their husbands and support that role. This also does not, men, I would encourage you to not use my words against me for your benefit when you get home, because the other thing it does not mean, when I say roles, I'm not talking about doing the dishes and washing the clothes and stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stewarding your family and leading them in family devotion. I'm talking about praying with your children, talking about training them in the encouragement, the admonition of the Lord. If you confuse any of that stuff for believing somehow that you're not called to help at home, then God help you. Both with the relationship that you are in with your wife and the relationship that you are in with the Lord of heaven and earth. If you're not helping your wife, then you're failing as the head of your household. Plain and simple. And so am I. That's not what I'm talking about either. Okay? So I'm going to try to be as clear as I can. We are the head of our homes, right? Men are called as pastors in the church. Women are not. But here's the thing. If men and women are actually equal image bearers, then we should not assign value based on role. I've tried to say from the moment I got here, and I hope that I've lived in such a way that at least shows that I'm attempting to believe that a pastor does not have greater inherent value in the church than any other church member, and that includes women. Just because I have a different role does not mean I have a different value. I am equal, and so are you in value. And so it's easy, I think it's easy to confuse this, and it's become a big problem for us. So what we do is we ascribe greater or lesser value to people based on roles that they serve, right? So a person who serves a more public role somehow then gets given a greater value. But that's not biblical. In fact, it's unbiblical to believe that way. We look at people who have roles that we don't have, and we say, well, if only I had that thing, and we begin to evaluate our own identity based on the role that someone else is serving. It's easy to do in the workforce, right? It's easy to do when you don't have the job you want. You feel like you're stuck somewhere doing something that no one values. And you think, if only I had this, if only I was in this situation, if only I had this job or this opportunity or this relationship, well, then these things would be great. And ultimately what we're doing is saying, if only I had that, then I would have value. But God puts value on you as an image bearer, not because of your work, but because He has made you, fearfully and wonderfully made you. You are valuable. Sometimes we can ascribe greater or lesser value to people simply based on whether or not they are male or female. I know many ladies, I've experienced and talked to many ladies in my life who, though it may not have been verbalized that it was wished that they had been a boy, they certainly acted that way. The parents did. I know many people who feel devalued because they are women. And so when a young man has a hard time throwing a ball, we say really unhelpful things like, you throw like a... You just devalued the image of God in women when you said that. And I don't think we even realize the weight of that statement when it comes out of our mouth. Right? The way we use our words matters. Truly matters. We want to be sure that we're elevating the image of God in women and in men because we're created to be valuable. We are valuable because we bear God's image, not because of what you do. Because the reality is, whatever job you have, one day you will not have. And when you cease having that job, you will be no less valuable to the eternal God of heaven and earth than you are now. It's a helpful word. The other thing that this means here is that we're thinking about the image of God rightly, and we're thinking about the fact that men and women are created equal in value, but different in role. The other thing, we hit on this last week, is that if we're going to believe that God created this way, and this was God's intention, then we must reject the idea that gender is fluid. According to the Scriptures, God created them male and female. Right? Now, I understand, like for many of us, and I think I'm kind of just on the edge of this generation that has a difficult time understanding how this is no longer a concept for us. Now, here's what I would encourage you to do. Number one, mockery of an unbeliever's belief in anything is not an appropriate way to share the gospel with them. You guys follow me? Your jokes hurt. And your hurt closes the door on pointing them to the love of Christ. Because if you think about it, we say genders are not fluid. God's created every person, male and female, equal to bear the image of God with equal responsibility before God, and then we proceed to make fun of those people who are not like us. What have we done to the image of God in that person? We have devalued them. Right? That's easy to do cross-generationally. Easy for us to make fun of people who don't think and believe like we do. Not appropriate. Not helpful. Right? I'm trying my best to be sure that everyone sitting in the room, including me, is thoroughly offended by this idea, because I believe it's supposed to do that. Right? So if you hadn't been offended yet, hang on. It's coming. Right? I've offended myself at least 10 times. But friends, we must believe that when the Bible says that God created male and female, He's doing more than just making a statement. The very essence of gender is rooted in the way that we are created prior to the fall. At its core, the cultural attempt to render gender as something that could be fluid is an attempt for humanity to wrestle control away from God in something that God has set and fixed. So if you want to begin to understand the struggle, just begin by asking yourself the question, have I ever tried to take control for something in my life that only God has control over? And if the answer to that question is yes, then I would think that the nature of your sinfulness might have far more in common with people who believe in gender fluidity than you would like for it to. Because at its core, it's an attempt to take control over something that isn't ours to take. A decision that isn't ours to make. It's a desire to have control. Okay? So, at the end, I would say one more thing about this that may be even more controversial in the context for this morning. Friends, it is possible to love a person with the love of Christ, to speak truthfully to them about what God has said, to call them to the hope of the gospel and to the need for change, to treat that person as valuable because they are created in God's image and still to completely disagree with their point of view. You can do all those things. The problem is often that we aren't able to do them. The problem is we don't want to because it requires an awful lot of effort. And we just don't want to work that hard to love people. Friends, love is work. If you don't believe that, get married. Right? Come back to the earlier illustration. So, we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves. And our neighbor in this culture is often confused about what the Bible says about the inherent value of human life. They are confused about what the Bible says about sexuality and gender, or in some cases, they have flatly rejected it. Can I encourage you that your flat rejection of them will not lead to some sort of acceptance of biblical truth? We are still called to love our neighbor as ourselves. We hear the question, the follow-up question, who is my neighbor? This is your neighbor. They're confused. Or they have rejected the Word of God. Your rejection of them, lacking in love, will not lead to the acceptance of the gospel. We do not honor or approve necessarily of the ways, or at all, the ways that the fall has defamed the image of God. But we do speak the truth in love. And in doing so, we point that person to the hope of the gospel. We are lacking love in some very critical ways. And we must repent. Because those people that we fail to love are created in God's image. Third thing it teaches us, we belong to God. The rest of them will go a little faster, I hope. We are created in the image of God, and we are owned by Him. Because God made everything. And everything that God makes, God owns. We reject the ownership of God as sinners, unrepentant. One of the things that you take on becoming a Christian is submission to the reality of the ownership of God. He owns us. He made us. He made us to look like Him, and then He remade us to look like His Son. So He owns us. Every sin, if that's the case, is nothing less than high treason against the King that made us to look like Him and rule like Him. Start thinking seriously about gossip. Think seriously about the things that we put into our bodies. We want to think seriously about the way that we talk to people instead of just curtly speaking harshly and then dismissing it as part of our fundamental nature. Then we start seeing each of those behaviors as high treason against the King of heaven and earth and deserving of His ultimate wrath. We start to think more seriously about our sin. And we start to think more thankfully about the work of the gospel to free us, to change us. And we see why God is just to execute wrath against unrepentant sinners. It starts in Genesis 1. Created to rule and reign and stewards God's creation, and instead of living this way, we rebel against Him because the serpent sells them into a lie. God doesn't want you to eat that because He knows that you will be like God. And yet, how was man created? Man was created to be like God. They bought into the lie. They executed rebellion. And God is just to execute that. So we hear things that are common in our culture, like saying, I can't worship a God who would send innocent people to hell. And my general response is, me neither. Because there are no innocent. Every person, Romans 1, every person guilty of rebellion and high treason. The image of God teaches us that God owns us. And then finally, the image of God teaches us that learning and work are good gifts intended to be a blessing to us. Work is supposed to be one of the essential components of life. He created them, and then verse 28, He says He blessed them. And He said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And if you were going to summarize that in just a couple of 3 words, it would be go to work. Work was created by God and is one of the primary means by which we reflect the image of God. And yet, for many of us, all we can think about is not working. That is a distortion of what it means to be created in the image of God. We're called to labor. Now, does that necessarily mean work a 9 to 5? No, not necessarily, but it does mean go to work. When we work, we fulfill what God has called us to do. But it's not just work. We should also be learners, right? You ever think about this? God created humanity, and humanity was sinless, but they were not omniscient, meaning they didn't know everything. Those walks, we'll read about this in Genesis 3, right? That God would come down and walk with people in the garden in the cool of the day. Like, I don't even know what that would be like. That sounds awesome, right? What would that be like for God to just be walking around? You know what they're talking about? Read the book of Proverbs. They're talking about wisdom and ruling wisely. The whole book of Proverbs is a reflection on how to actually live out God's wisdom. And God's wisdom was first supposed to be imparted in the garden prior to the fall to these people. But Satan sold them into thinking what? Well, God's not going to teach you everything you need to know. So if you'll do this thing, then you'll know what you need to know. On into a lie. So you've got this picture of Adam and Eve in the garden, commissioned to do this thing, and God imparting knowledge and wisdom to them so they would continue to learn and grow and be even better at what they were already good at. So we're called to be learners. Right? That's part of what it means to reflect the image of God. Not because God learns, but because God created us to continue to grow and look more like Him over the course of our lives. And so we should also be lifelong learners and lifelong workers. Our lives should be marked by an increasing capacity and willingness to both learn and work. And yet, sadly, for most of us, the opposite is true on both accounts. The older we get, the less work we are inclined to do, and the less learning we are inclined to do. And I only know that because the older I get, the less I want anything to change. It is amazing to me how much less comfortable I am with change in my 40s than I was in my 20s. In my 20s, you could have changed direction on me like that. I'd have gone with you. It's fine. It's like returning the jet ski. Now, it feels like I'm trying to turn around a battleship. I don't even have categories for thinking in new ways. Like, I had to build them. Wait, what? We got to slow this down. I got to talk about this and think about it. This happened to me this morning. Had a new idea presented. I was not even ready for it. I'm like, whoa, what? Whoa, no. Because my problem is when something new comes in, my no button is stuck, right? So you come at me with a new idea, and I just go, no. Like, I don't even think no. It just comes out of me before I'm even ready to say it. Maybe you guys can't relate to this, but the older I get, the more I'm relating to this idea, right? You know what's happening is that I'm working in an inverted way against what God has created me to be, because the longer I age, the more I age, what's actually supposed to happen is that I'm supposed to listen to new ideas and go, oh, I should be learning and thinking and really praying about the fact that I don't have the corner market on all knowledge in the universe. Huh? But that's not what I do. Right? Because the older I get, the more resistant I am. And the reality is, for all of us, the older you get, the harder it gets to get up and go to the creation process. Right? That's what I said. I said that too. I'm writing this sermon in my office going, golly. Right? But it's true. It's the way it works itself out. But one of my very favorite things, my pastor, when I was a pastoral intern a long time ago when I was in my 20s, and I did not understand what he was saying, but it sounded really holy, said, he was in his 50s at the time, so I guess he's older than that. And and so he would talk about getting up in the morning and how everything on his body popped. Like, it sounded like somebody was popping popcorn on the way from the bedroom into the kitchen to go get coffee. And I was like, man, that sounds terrible, because here I'm in my 20s, He's like, you know what? And I don't know whether he meant it or not, but it sounded awesome. Here's what he said. He said, every time, here's what I try to do. He's like, I don't do it every morning. But most mornings, I try to get up, and with every pop, I tell myself, this body is fading, but Christ is forever. That changes your mornings, right? And one day, the body is recreated, and there's no more creaky poppy stuff. That's awesome. And so we're reminded we're to be lifelong workers and lifelong learners. And the reality is, the older you get, the harder it gets to do both of those things. And that's actually the way it's supposed to be. So, hope You get some pictures. I literally could spend another hour. I'm not going to. I could spend another hour just talking about why it is so critical to understand what it means to be created in the image of God. I'll end with this. What's even more amazing is not just why we matter, but what Christ has done. You remember we referred a few weeks ago to Colossians 1:15. We were talking about the fact that Jesus was actually the agent of creation. It was Jesus who was there. He was the one through whom the universe was created. And we referred to a passage in Colossians 1:15, where Jesus is called the image of the invisible God. So you see what happens. Paul would later talk about Jesus being the second Adam. Now, why does that matter? The first Adam was created as God's image, and how did he do? Not so good. But the second Adam, he came and was sinless and perfectly before God's image for us. Why? Because we can't do it perfectly. Quite literally, I'm imagining, for most of us, we heard something along the way in this sermon, at least I hope we did, that we just don't do perfectly. Right? That was the point. We don't do any of this perfectly. We need a perfect image bearer, and we have one in Christ. Well, the sinlessness of Christ is so important for us. Because Christ's sinlessness was the perfect display for us of the image of God. He wasn't marred by sin. He wasn't tainted by the fall. And yet he was human. He showed us the perfect way. He showed us the perfect image. He bore for us the wrath that we deserved because we are imperfect image bearers. And now he set us off on the process of restoring the image of God. It's like we're taking the process of growing in Christ, it's like taking and erasing all that graffiti on Bald Rock. So that one of these days we're restored to our pristine beauty. Growing in Christ matters. Because Christ has freed us to be able to do that. And if that's true, then here's what it means. True humanness is only fully experienced by those who are reconciled to God. Now, I'm not saying that a person who isn't a Christian is less than human. I am saying they're not going to be able to experience full humanity in the way that a Christian can. This is why it ought not surprise us when non-Christian people act like non-Christian people. We have something different. We're made into something different. We are the ones who have had Christ redeem us. We are the ones who see the image of God cultivated in our lives so that we look more like Christ, which means then that sanctification, the process is the process of more fully revealing the restored image of God in you. Now, if that does not motivate you to get up in the morning and read your Bible and hear the words of God so that He might transform you, then I don't think you could be motivated. Not by anything good. You understand what's happening is that God, as He works in your heart, as He creates change in your life, is restoring the image of God. So that when people look at us, we ought to at least be a dim picture of what Jesus looks like. Jesus is the perfect image of God. You are called to grow in Christ. It is your duty as a Christian to grow in Christ. Friends, if you have never experienced change because of being a Christian, I would contend to you that you might not be a Christian. Christians are people who have changed and are changing because of the life-changing work of Jesus Christ. And if Christ hasn't changed you, well, then maybe you haven't been changed. Is there a passion in your life to look more like the Christ that redeemed you? Is there a desire to grow in your love and affection for Christ? I'm not even asking how big it is. Is there at least a little bit there? Is there something in you that hears a sermon like this and goes, man, I would love to see that happen? Maybe you dismiss it real quick, but is it at least present? And if it is, I would encourage you, then that's a sign, right, that change has happened. And I would encourage you to fan that into flame, right? I tell people Christian growth is more like Bear Grylls. You guys know who that is, the outdoor guy? He would he's this, they follow him around with a cameraman who doesn't have any food or anything in his pocket, and they take film of him. And the best thing to ever watch this guy do is to start a fire. Because it's almost like Clearly, this is the most important thing in this guy's life right now. He's getting this fire started. And so he's got this thing and just a little bit of smoke. And then as soon as he sees the smoke, he doesn't go, right? He's not blowing it out hard, but he is just, and there's nothing else in the world right now than this little flame. Listen, friends, if there's anything in your heart that says that, I need to grow in Christ, then let there not be anything else in your mind other than what it means to grow in Christ. Because that is the most important thing. There is nothing else that is as important as growing in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, on the other side, if you've been a Christian for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 50 years or 190 years and you have never helped another Christian follow Jesus, I want to encourage you that part of honoring the image of God and honoring the redemptive work of Christ in other people is helping other Christians made and then remade in the image of God learn to follow Jesus. Tons of passages in the New Testament. Titus 2 is a good starting point that teach us that our responsibility, if God has granted us the blessing of Christian maturity, then one of the things that we ought to be doing as Christians is to help other people follow Jesus. It's messy and inconvenient because it's actual love. And actual love is both of those things, messy and inconvenient at the same time. But we're called to help others follow Jesus. Friends, the work of Christ redeemed God's image in people. One day, Christ will return. And when he does, we as Christians understand that our great hope is not heaven. It's the new heaven and the new earth where we get to be remade and restored. And this call that was given to us in Genesis 1, we get to live out for eternity, unhindered and unencumbered by sin, to be co-heirs with Jesus. In the meantime, while we're here,